Alright, let's be real. Mornings are a struggle, afternoons are a struggle. Basically, any time before I've had my coffee is a potential disaster zone. And look, I love a fancy coffee shop vibe as much as the next person, but my wallet? Not so much. Plus, sometimes you just want good iced coffee without putting on real pants or dealing with, So what if I told you that you, yes, you, could make ridiculously good iced coffee at home? And no, you don't need a barista badge or a $500 espresso machine to make iced coffee that slaps. All you need? 5 basic ingredients, a little ice, and like 10 minutes max. Let me show you how. We're not aiming for coffee snobbery here. We're aiming for delicious, caffeinating, and easy. This is the kind of recipe you can make when you're half asleep, when you've got a million things to do, or when you just deserve a little treat without the fuss. Think of this as your entry-level guide to becoming your own favorite barista, minus the complicated latte art and the judgment if you want extra caramel. We're keeping it simple, we're keeping it real, and most importantly, we're keeping it caffeinated. So grab your favorite mug, or let's be honest, whatever cleanish glass is closest, and let's dive into the magic of 5 simple ingredients. I promise, by the end of this, you'll be wondering why you ever waited in line for overpriced iced coffee. This isn't just a recipe, it's a lifestyle upgrade. A cheaper, faster, and honestly probably tastier lifestyle upgrade. Let's get brewing. Or well, not really brewing in the complicated sense. You'll see. Okay, first things first. The absolute backbone of this whole operation, the coffee. Now, when I say coffee, I don't want you to immediately picture some artisanal, single-origin, hand-picked beans that cost more than your monthly streaming subscriptions combined. Nah, we're not about that life today. What we about is strength. This coffee needs to have some oomph, some character, some get up and go. Because remember, we're going to be adding milk, ice, and maybe some sweetness, and all that jazz can dilute a wimpy coffee into sad brown water. And nobody, absolutely nobody, wants sad brown water. So, how do we achieve this necessary strength? You've got options, my friend. My personal go-to for speed and convenience, especially when I'm feeling particularly lazy, is good old instant coffee. Don't knock it till you try it properly. There are some surprisingly decent instant coffees out there these days. The trick is to use a little less water than the package suggests when you're making the initial coffee concentrate. We want it potent, almost like a makeshift espresso shot. Think strong, think bold, think this will definitely wake me up. Another fantastic option, if you're a planner, or just forgetful like me and leave things overnight, is cold brew concentrate. You can buy this pre-made, or you can make your own super easily. Just coffee grounds in cold water, left to steep for 12 to 24 hours. The beauty of cold brew concentrate is that it's naturally less acidic and super smooth, but still packs a caffeinated punch. Again, it's a concentrate, so it's designed to be strong and then diluted. Perfect for our iced coffee mission. And hey, if you've got leftover brewed coffee from your morning pot, don't you dare pour that liquid gold down the drain. Let it cool, stick it in the fridge, and that can be your base. Just make sure it was brewed strong. If you usually make your drip coffee on the weaker side, maybe brew a special, slightly more robust batch for this iced coffee adventure. The key, regardless of your method, is intensity. We need a coffee base that can stand up for itself. You might be thinking, Kim's husband, what about espresso? And yeah, if you have an espresso machine and want to pull a shot or two, go for it. That's obviously a fantastic, strong base. But the whole point of this recipe is accessibility and ease. We're proving you don't fancy equipment. A humble jar of instant coffee can be just as effective in creating a delicious iced drink if you treat it right. Remember, the coffee is the star of the show, even if it's sharing the stage with other delicious ingredients. It sets the tone, provides the caffeine kick, and delivers that core coffee flavor we're all chasing. So don't skimp on making it strong. If it tastes a little strong on its own, that's probably a good sign for this recipe, because it means it won't get lost once everything else is added. Think of it like building a house. The coffee is your foundation. If the foundation is weak, the whole house is going to be a bit wobbly, right? Same here. A strong coffee base ensures that every sip is satisfying and actually tastes like Well, coffee, not just vaguely coffee-flavored milk. Alright, ingredient number 2, water. Now, this might seem ridiculously obvious, especially if you're using instant coffee or a super strong cold brew concentrate. But water plays a crucial role, and it's not just about, making things wet. It's about control and balance. Or, if you're like me sometimes, it's about making sure your coffee isn't so strong it puts hair on your chest. Unless that's your goal, in which case you do you. If you've made your coffee base with instant coffee, you've already used a bit of hot water to dissolve it, but we're not done with water yet, potentially. Depending on how potent you made that initial coffee sludge, and I say sludge with affection, you might want to add a little more cold water to dilute it slightly. The milk and ice go in. This is especially true if you're not a fan of super intense coffee flavor, or if you want your final drink to be a bit larger without just being all milk. Think of water as your volume adjuster and your intensity modulator. A splash more water can mellow out a coffee that's bordering on aggressive, making it a bit more sessionable, if you will. It can also help if you're trying to make your precious cold brew concentrate stretch a little further. A little water can turn a small amount of concentrate into a more substantial base for your iced coffee, without sacrificing too much of that coffee kick. Now, if you're using a ready-to-drink cold brew that isn't a concentrate, or if you've used leftover drip coffee that's already at a good drinking strength, you might skip adding extra water altogether, or just use a tiny bit. This is where you get to be the master of your own coffee destiny. Taste your coffee base. Is it screamingly strong? Maybe add a touch of water. Is it pretty balanced? Then maybe hold back. And let's talk about the of water for a hot second. Does it matter? Well, if you're a true connoisseur, you'll say yes, filtered water is king. And generally, better water does make better coffee. But for super simple 5-ingredient iced coffee, if tap water is what you've got and it tastes fine to you, then use it. We're not trying to win any awards here, remember? We're trying to get caffeinated deliciously and efficiently. However, if your tap water has a strong chlorine taste or some other funky flavor, that come through in your coffee. In that case, using filtered water, even from a simple pitcher filter, can make a noticeable difference. It's a small step that can elevate the overall taste, ensuring that the flavors you're getting are coffee, milk, and sweetness, not coffee, milk, sweetness, and essence of swimming pool. The temperature of the water you add at this stage, if you add any, should ideally be cold, especially if your coffee concentrate is still warm from dissolving instant granules. We're making coffee, so we want to keep things heading in a chilly direction. Adding hot or warm water now will just mean your ice melts faster, and you end up with a more diluted drink quicker than you'd like. Alright team, let's talk about what puts the iced in iced coffee. It's ice. Groundbreaking, I know. But seriously, the ice is more than just a cooling agent, it's a critical component that affects the texture, the dilution rate, and the overall enjoyment of your homemade caffeinated masterpiece. This isn't room temperature coffee, and it certainly isn't slightly cool coffee, it's iced coffee, and we need to respect the ice. First off, you're going to need a good amount of it. Don't be shy, fill that glass up. I'd say at least halfway, maybe even 2/3 full of ice, you add your coffee mixture and milk. Why so much? Well, the more ice you have, the quicker it will chill your drink down, and counterintuitively, the slower it will melt overall because the collective coldness keeps each cube colder for longer. Science, or something like that. Just trust me, more ice is generally better. Now the type of ice, does it matter? Kinda. Standard ice cubes from your freezer tray or ice maker are perfectly fine, they do the job. If you want to get a little fancy, or if you're particular about your ice, you could use larger cubes, which melt slower. Or if you're like me and sometimes enjoy that coffee shop style chewable ice, you might have a special ice maker or a way to crush your ice. Crushed ice will chill the drink faster, but it will also melt faster, potentially leading to a more watery drink if you're a slow sipper. Here's a pro tip, or at least a Kim's husband trying to be clever tip coffee ice cubes. If you often find yourself with leftover coffee, pour it into an ice cube tray and freeze it. Then when you make your iced coffee, use these coffee ice cubes instead of regular water ice cubes. As they melt, they'll add more coffee flavor to your drink instead of diluting it with water. Genius, right? Or at least a good way to combat watery coffee syndrome. The order of operations matters a bit here too. I usually go ice in the glass first, then the coffee-water mixture, then the milk, then the sweetener if I'm using it. Why ice first? It helps to immediately start chilling down the coffee concentrate, especially if it's still a tad warm from dissolving instant coffee. Plus, it just feels right, like building your drink from the chill up. Don't underestimate the psychological power of a glass full of clinking ice. It just screams refreshing. It's the sound of summer, the sound of a well-deserved break, the sound of impending caffeination. Even on a dreary day, a glass packed with ice can make your homemade coffee feel like a special treat. It's all part of the experience we're crafting here. One thing to be mindful of is how quickly you plan to drink your iced coffee. If you're going to chug it down in 5 minutes, no judgment, I've been there, then the melt rate of your ice is less of a concern. But if you're a sipper, someone who likes to make their coffee last, then you'll want to either use larger cubes, coffee ice cubes, or just be prepared for a little dilution towards the end, or just drink faster. And make sure your ice is fresh. Ice can absorb freezer odors if it's been sitting in there uncovered for ages next to last week's fish sticks. If your ice tastes a bit off, your coffee will taste a bit off. So, use fresh ice, or keep your ice in a covered bin or bag if you're not making it fresh daily. It's a small detail, but it can make a difference to the clean taste of your drink. The amount of ice also affects the final volume of your drink. Alright, we've got our strong coffee base, we've balanced it with a bit of water, or not, and we've packed our glass with ice. Now it's time for the ingredient that brings the creaminess, the smoothness, the luxurious mouthfeel milk. Or, your favorite non-dairy alternative. This is where your iced coffee starts to feel like a real treat, transforming from just strong, cold coffee into something richer and more satisfying. The world of milk is vast and wonderful, and thankfully most options work beautifully in iced coffee. If you're a dairy person, whole milk is going to give you the richest, creamiest result. It's got that full-fat goodness that just coats your tongue and melds perfectly with the coffee. It's my personal go-to when I'm feeling a bit indulgent, or when the day just demands that extra level of comfort. It makes the coffee feel substantial. If you're looking for something a little lighter, 2% or even 1% milk will still do the trick. You'll get a bit less richness, but still, a pleasant creaminess. Skim milk? Well, it'll make your coffee whiter, but it's not going to contribute much in the way of creamy texture. But hey, if that's your preference, you do you. This is your coffee adventure after all. No judgment here, just options. Now for my non-dairy folks, you are spoiled for choice these days. Oat milk is a superstar in coffee, both hot and iced. It's naturally a bit sweet and has a fantastic creamy texture that mimics dairy milk surprisingly well. Barista blend oat milks are even better, as they're formulated to be extra creamy and not separate in coffee. Almond milk is another popular choice, offering a lighter, slightly nutty flavor. Just be aware that some thinner almond milks can look a bit watery in coffee. Soy milk is a classic, non-dairy option, usually quite creamy, and with a distinct flavor that many people love in their coffee. Coconut milk, the beverage kind, not the super thick canned kind unless you're feeling wild, can add a lovely tropical note, though its flavor is more pronounced. There's also cashew milk, macadamia milk, rice milk, the list goes on. Experiment and find what you love. Each will bring its own unique character to your iced coffee. The amount of milk you add is, once again, totally up to your personal preference. Do you like your iced coffee dark and intense with just a splash of milk for color and a hint of creaminess? Or do you prefer it milky and light, more like a coffee-flavored milkshake? There's no right or wrong answer. I usually eyeball it, pouring until it looks like the perfect shade of creamy beige that makes my heart happy. Start with a little, stir, and add more until it's just right. One thing to consider is how the milk interacts with the acidity of the coffee. Some very acidic coffees can curdle certain non-dairy milks, especially if the milk is super cold and the coffee is still a bit warm. This is less of an issue with iced coffee since everything is chilled, and cold brew, if you're using it, is naturally less acidic. but it's something to keep in mind if you ever run into texture issues. Generally, higher fat milks, both dairy and non-dairy, tend to be more stable. Don't be afraid to mix and match either. Maybe a blend of almond and oat milk gives you your perfect texture and flavor. Or perhaps a splash of heavy cream or half and half in addition to your regular milk if you want to take the richness to a whole new level. This is your laboratory of deliciousness. Feel free to play around with different combinations until you discover your signature iced coffee blend. The milk doesn't just add creaminess, it also mellows out any harshness from a very strong coffee, smoothing the edges and making the whole drink more harmonious. And finally, we arrive at the fifth and final ingredient, the one that's often a source of debate in coffee circles but is absolutely essential for many of us. Sugar, or more broadly, sweetener. Look, there's no shame in liking your coffee sweet. You're not trying to impress a coffee sommelier who sips unsweetened single-origin espresso and talks about notes of bergamot and despair. You're just tired and thirsty, and you want your iced coffee to taste good. So, let's talk options for sweetening your glorious homemade creation. The most straightforward is regular granulated sugar. If you're going this route, it's best to add it to your coffee concentrate when it's still warm, if you used hot water for instant coffee, or to make a simple syrup. Why? Because sugar doesn't dissolve very well in cold liquids. You'll end up with a pile of undissolved sugar at the bottom of your glass and an unevenly sweetened drink. Sad. Making a simple syrup is, well, simple. Just combine equal parts sugar and hot water, stir until the sugar is completely dissolved, let it cool, and store it in the fridge. 1 part sugar, 1 part water. That's it. This liquid sweetener will mix beautifully into your iced coffee, ensuring every sip is perfectly sweetened. You can make a batch, and it'll last you for a good while. This is my preferred method for granulated sugar. Of course, there are tons of other sweeteners you can use. Brown sugar or demerara sugar can add a lovely molassesy depth. Maple syrup is a fantastic option if you like that distinct maple flavor. It pairs surprisingly well with coffee. Agave nectar is another liquid sweetener that dissolves easily. Honey can work too, though it has a strong flavor that might compete with the coffee, so use it judiciously unless you love that combo. And then there are the flavored syrups. Vanilla syrup, caramel syrup, hazelnut syrup, the kind you see at coffee shops. You can buy these or even make your